Sarah Martinez was only 8 years old when the heavy metal doors of Riverside Children's Home slammed shut behind her. The sound echoed through the cold hallway like thunder, making her small body shake with fear. She clutched her worn teddy, bare closer to her chest, the only thing she had left from her previous life. The woman in the crisp white uniform looked down at Sarah with tired eyes. "This is your new home," she said in a voice that held no warmth. "You'll follow the rules here, or there will be consequences." Sarah's story began 3 months earlier when her grandmother, the only family she had ever known, passed away from cancer. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was just 2 years old, and her grandmother had raised her with love and kindness. But now, with no other relatives willing to take her in, Sarah found herself in the custody of the state. Riverside Children's Home was supposed to be a temporary solution. Social workers promised Sarah that a loving family would adopt her soon. They painted pictures of birthday parties, bedtime stories, and family vacations. Sarah believed every word, holding on to hope like a lifeline. The first few days at Riverside were confusing and scary. The building was old and gray, with narrow windows that barely let in sunlight. The walls were painted a dull green color that reminded Sarah of hospital rooms. There were 43 other children living there, ranging from babies to teenagers. Most of them had been there for years. Sarah quickly learned that Riverside was nothing like the warm, loving home she had shared with her grandmother. The staff members were strict and often cruel. They had too many children to care for and not enough patience or resources to go around. Breakfast was served at exactly 6 in the morning, and anyone who missed it went hungry until lunch. The director of the home, Mrs. Blackwood, was a tall, thin woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She ran Riverside like a military camp, with countless rules and harsh punishments for anyone who broke them. Sarah learned these rules quickly. No talking after lights out, no playing in the hallways, no asking for seconds at meals, and absolutely no complaining about anything. Sarah's bed was a narrow cot in a room she shared with 7 other girls. The room was cramped and cold, with one small window that looked out onto the parking lot. At night, Sarah would lie awake listening to the other girls cry softly into their pillows. She would whisper prayers to her grandmother, asking her to watch over her from heaven. The days at Riverside followed the same routine. Wake up at 5:30, make beds with military precision, eat breakfast in silence, attend basic school lessons in a cramped classroom, do assigned chores, eat dinner, and go to bed by 7:30. There was no time for play, no television, no books except for old textbooks, and no visitors allowed. Sarah tried to make friends with the other children, but many of them had been hurt so badly by life that they had built walls around their hearts. They warned her not to get her hopes up about adoption. "Nobody wants the older kids," a girl named Jenny told her. "And if they do want you, something's probably wrong with them." Despite the warnings, Sarah couldn't give up hope. Every time a car pulled into the parking lot, she would run to the window, thinking it might be her new family coming to take her home. Social workers would occasionally visit, bringing prospective parents to meet some of the children. Sarah would clean herself up as best she could, put on her brightest smile, and try to be the perfect child they might want. But weeks turned into months, and no family chose Sarah. She watched as younger children got adopted while she remained behind. Each disappointment felt like a knife in her heart, but she refused to give up believing that somewhere out there was a family meant for her. The other children began to tease Sarah about her optimism. They called her dreamer and told her she was stupid for believing anyone would want her. Some of the older boys were particularly cruel, stealing her few belongings and pushing her around when the staff wasn't watching. Mrs. Blackwood seemed to take special pleasure in crushing Sarah's spirit. When Sarah would ask about potential, families who had visited, Mrs. Blackwood would shake her head and say things like, "They said you were too needy. or they wanted a child who wasn't so damaged. The worst part of life at Riverside wasn't the bad food, the cramped conditions, or even the cruel treatment from some staff members. It was the slowly growing realization that she might never leave this place. As her 9th birthday came and went without celebration, Sarah began to understand what the other children had tried to tell her. She started having nightmares about growing up at Riverside, becoming one of those sad teenagers who aged out of the system with nowhere to go. She would wake up in cold sweats, her heart pounding with fear about her future. The school lessons at Riverside were basic and often interrupted by the needs of running the facility. Sarah, who had been a bright student before coming to Riverside, found herself falling behind academically. There were no resources for children who needed extra help, and no encouragement for those who showed special talents or interests. One particularly dark day in October, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She had been at Riverside for 7 months, and her hope was nearly gone. That night, as she lay on her narrow cot, listening to the wind rattle the windows, she made herself a promise. She would not let this place break her spirit completely. Even if no family ever came for her, even if she had to stay at Riverside until she was 18, she would find a way to survive with her heart intact. She would be kind to the other children, work hard in school, and never stop believing that better days were possible. Little did Sarah know that miles away, a couple named David and Maria Rodriguez were having their own sleepless night, thinking about the little girl they had met briefly at Riverside 3 days earlier. Something about Sarah's brave smile and gentle nature had touched their hearts in a way they couldn't explain. As Sarah finally drifted off to sleep, holding her teddy bear close, she had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. David and Maria Rodriguez had been married for 12 years and had been trying to have children for most of that time. After years of fertility treatments, miscarriages, and disappointments, they had finally accepted that biological children might not be part of their story. The decision to adopt hadn't been easy, but their love for each other and their desire to share that love with a child had led them to the doors of Riverside Children's Home. David worked as a middle school teacher, and Maria was a nurse at the local hospital. They lived in a cozy 3-bedroom house with a big backyard, complete with a tire swing that David had hung from the old oak tree years ago, hoping that one day a child would play on it. Their first visit to Riverside had been overwhelming. The gray building and institutional atmosphere had made Maria's heart ache for all the children living there. They had been introduced to several children, but most seemed either too withdrawn or trying too hard to impress them. Then they met Sarah. She was sitting quietly in the corner of the common room, reading an old, torn picture book to a smaller boy who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. Her voice was soft and patient as she pointed to the pictures and made up stories to go with them, since many of the pages were missing. "That's Sarah Martinez," the social worker had whispered. "She's been here about 7 months. Very sweet girl, but she's getting older, which makes placement more difficult." David and Maria watched as Sarah gently helped the little boy turn the pages, her face lighting up with genuine joy at his laughter. There was something about her kindness to the younger child that touched them deeply. When Sarah looked up and noticed them watching, she didn't put on a fake smile or try to show off. She simply waved shyly and went back to her story. That night, David and Maria couldn't stop talking about Sarah. "Did you see how gentle she was with that little boy?" Maria asked. "And those eyes? There's so much wisdom there for someone so young." David nodded. "She's been through a lot, you can tell, but she hasn't let it make her hard or mean. That takes real strength." They had gone home that first day and spent hours looking at the information packet the social worker had given them about Sarah. Her background was heartbreaking, losing her parents so young, then losing her grandmother who had been her whole world. The social worker had been honest about the challenges they might face, adopting an older child who had experienced trauma. She might have trust issues, the woman had explained. Children who have lost so much sometimes have trouble believing that new relationships are permanent. It could take time for her to open up to you. But David and Maria weren't looking for easy. They were looking for the child who was meant to be part of their family, and something told them that Sarah might be that child. They requested a second visit, this time with the opportunity to spend more one-on-one time with Sarah. The social worker arranged for them to take her to the small play area behind the building for an hour. Sarah was nervous at first, unsure what to say or do. She had been disappointed so many times that she was afraid to let herself hope again. But David and Maria were different from the other couples she had met. They didn't ask her to perform or try to prove how good she could be. Instead, they asked her about her interests, her dreams, and what she missed most about living with her grandmother. "I miss cooking with her," Sarah said quietly. "She taught me how to make tamales for Christmas. We would spend the whole day in the kitchen, and she would tell me stories about when she was little in Mexico." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "I would love to learn how to make tamales," she said. "My grandmother tried to teach me, but I was never very good at it. Maybe you could teach me." For the first time in months, Sarah felt a spark of excitement. The idea of sharing her grandmother's recipes with someone who would appreciate them made her heart feel lighter. David showed her pictures on his phone of their house, their dog Max, and the tire swing in the backyard. "Do you like to swing?" he asked. Sarah nodded eagerly. "My grandmother had a little swing in her backyard. I used to pretend I was flying when I would swing really high." "Well, this one goes pretty high too," David said with a smile. "And Max loves to play fetch in the yard. Do you like dogs?" Sarah's face lit up. She had always wanted a pet, but her grandmother hadn't been able to care for one, and pets certainly weren't allowed at Riverside. As their hour together came to an end, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope that felt real and solid, not just wishful thinking. David and Maria seemed genuinely interested in her as a person, not just as a child they might adopt. "We'd like to visit again next week, if that's okay with you," Maria said gently. "Maybe we could go get ice cream and talk some more." Sarah nodded so enthusiastically that both adults laughed. It was the first time they had heard her laugh, and the sound was like music. That week felt like the longest week of Sarah's life. She replayed every moment of their visit, analyzing every word and expression. Were they really interested in her, or were they just being kind? She had learned not to trust too easily, but something about David and Maria felt different. The other. Children at Riverside noticed the change in Sarah. She was quieter than usual, lost in thought much of the time. Jenny, the girl who had warned her about getting her hopes up, watched her with concern. "Don't do this to yourself again," Jenny warned. "They all seem nice at first. Then they find some reason why you won't fit into their perfect family." But Sarah couldn't help herself. For the first time since arriving at Riverside, she felt like she had met people who might actually want her, just as she was. Mrs. Blackwood seemed to sense Sarah's renewed hope and took every opportunity to crush it. "The Rodriguez family is taking their time deciding," she would say with a cold smile. "That's usually not a good sign. Families who really want a child don't need to think about it so much." Despite Mrs. Blackwood's cruel words, Sarah held on to the memory of Maria's kind eyes and David's warm laugh. She began to imagine what it would be like to live in a real home again, to have parents who cared about her dreams and fears, to maybe even have that dog named Max as a companion. The second visit went even better than the first. David and Maria took her to a small ice cream shop in town, and Sarah felt like a normal kid for the first time in months. They talked and laughed, and Sarah found herself opening up about her memories of her grandmother and her hopes for the future. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" David asked as they shared a banana split. Sarah thought carefully. "I want to help other kids like me," she said. "Kids who don't have families. Maybe I could be a social worker, but a nice one who really cares. Maria reached across the table and gently touched Sarah's hand. That's a beautiful dream, she said, and I think you would be wonderful at helping other children. As they drove back to Riverside, Sarah felt her heart sinking. She didn't want this day to end. She didn't want to go back to the gray walls and cold hallways. We're going to talk to the social worker this week, David said as they walked her to the door. There are some things we need to discuss about the adoption process. Sarah's heart leaped. They had said the word adoption like it was a real possibility, not just a maybe. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, paperwork, and home visits as David and Maria worked through the adoption process. Sarah tried not to get too excited, but it was impossible to contain her growing hope. The social worker, Ms. Thompson, was kind and encouraging, explaining each step of the process to Sarah so she wouldn't be scared or confused. The Rodriguez family has passed their background checks, Ms. Thompson told Sarah during one of their private meetings. They've completed their home study, and their references all say wonderful things about them. But I need to ask you something important, Sarah. Do you want this adoption to happen? Because your feelings matter too. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. In all her time at Riverside, no adult had ever asked her what she wanted. Yes, she whispered. I want it more than anything. Ms. Thompson smiled warmly. Good, because they want it too. In fact, Maria calls me almost every day asking how you're doing and if there's anything they can do to help move the process along. During this waiting period, David and Maria were allowed to take Sarah on longer visits. They went to the zoo, where Sarah marveled at the elephants and laughed at the silly monkeys. They took her to their house for dinner, where she met Max, a golden retriever who immediately fell in love with her. The house was everything Sarah had dreamed a real home would be. It was warm and cozy, with family photos on the walls and the smell of Maria's cooking filling the kitchen. Sarah's potential bedroom was painted a soft lavender color, with white furniture and a window that looked out onto the backyard where the tire swing swayed gently in the breeze. We thought you might like to help us decorate it, Maria said as they stood in the doorway. If you decide you want to live here with us. Sarah couldn't speak. The room was already more beautiful than anywhere she had ever slept. The bed had a real comforter instead of the thin blankets at Riverside, and there were shelves waiting to be filled with books and toys. Can I really swing on the tire swing whenever I want? Sarah asked, still hardly believing this could be real. Whenever you want, David confirmed. And Max loves to play in the yard, too. He's been waiting for a kid to play fetch with him. As if he understood, Max barked and wagged his tail, making Sarah giggle. These visits became the highlight of Sarah's weeks. She would count down the days until she could leave Riverside and pretend, for just a few hours, that she was part of a real family. David would help her with her homework, patiently explaining math problems that the overworked teachers at Riverside didn't have time to help with. Maria would teach her simple recipes, sharing stories about her own childhood as they cooked together. Mighty. Grandmother always said that food made with love tastes better, Maria told her as they made chocolate chip cookies one afternoon. That's why everything she made was so delicious. Sarah nodded eagerly. My grandmother said the same thing. She said you have to put a little bit of your heart into everything you cook. Smart women. Our grandmothers, Maria said with a smile. I think they would have been friends. The other children at Riverside watched Sarah's transformation with mixed emotions. Some were happy for her, but others became jealous and mean. They would whisper that the Rodriguez family would change their minds once they got to know her better, or that something would go wrong with the adoption like it had for other kids they had known. Mrs. Blackwood seemed particularly determined to dampen Sarah's spirits. She would make snide comments about families who took too long to make decisions, or remind Sarah that adoption plans sometimes fell through at the last minute. Don't get too comfortable with this family, she warned Sarah one day. I've seen dozens of children get their hopes up only to be disappointed. Smart children protect themselves by not expecting too much. But Sarah had learned something important during her visits with David and Maria. She had learned that some adults could be trusted, that some people kept their promises, and that love could be real and lasting. She decided to trust her heart. Instead of Mrs. Blackwood's bitter warnings, the legal proceedings moved slowly, as they always do. There were court dates and meetings with lawyers, home inspections, and psychological evaluations. David and Maria navigated each requirement with patience and determination, keeping Sarah informed every step of the way. These things take time. Because the court wants to make sure it's the right decision for everyone, Ms. Thompson explained. But everything looks good. The judge just wants to be thorough. Finally, after 3 months of waiting, the day arrived for the final court hearing. Sarah had never been to a courthouse before, and the big building with its marble floors and high ceilings was intimidating. She wore her best dress, a simple blue one that Maria had bought for her, and carried the teddy bear her grandmother had given her years ago. David and Maria sat beside her at a big wooden table, with their lawyer explaining what would happen. The judge would ask some questions, review the paperwork, and then make the final decision about the adoption. Judge Williams was a kind-looking woman with gray hair and gentle eyes. She looked over all the documents carefully, then spoke directly to Sarah. "Sarah, I want to make sure you understand what's happening today," she said. "If I approve this adoption, David and Maria Rodriguez will become your legal parents. That means they will take care of you and love you, and you will be part of their family forever. Do you understand what that means?" Sarah nodded, her heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. "And is this what you want?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah said in a clear, strong voice. "I want David and Maria to be my parents." The judge smiled. "And Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, do you understand that if I approve this adoption, Sarah will become your daughter, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails?" "We do, Your Honor," David and Maria said together. "And is this what you both want?" "More than anything," Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. Judge Williams reviewed the papers one more time, then looked up with a smile. "Based on all the evidence presented, the home study reports, and the clear desires of all parties involved, I hereby grant this petition for adoption. Sarah Martinez, you are now legally Sarah Rodriguez, daughter of David and Maria Rodriguez." The gavel came down with a final bang, and Sarah's life changed forever. Maria immediately burst into tears and pulled Sarah into a tight hug. "You're our daughter now," she whispered. "Our precious daughter." David wrapped his arms around both of them, and for the first time in almost a year, Sarah felt like she truly belonged somewhere. The paperwork that followed was just a formality. Sarah Rodriguez walked out of that courthouse holding her parents' hands, carrying not just her teddy bear, but also her new birth certificate and social security card with her new name. As they drove away from the courthouse toward home, Sarah looked back at the building where her old life had officially ended and her new one had begun. The first few weeks in her new home were like living in a beautiful dream that Sarah was afraid she might wake up from. Everything was different from Riverside. The warm meals served whenever she was hungry, the soft bed with clean sheets, the freedom to go outside and play whenever she wanted. Most importantly, there were David and Maria who seemed to genuinely care about every detail of her day. "How was school today, mija?" Maria would ask each afternoon when Sarah got off the bus. The Spanish endearment made Sarah's heart warm every time she heard it. Maria had started teaching her simple Spanish phrases, sharing her cultural heritage with her new daughter. Sarah's new school was much better than the basic education she had received at Riverside. The teachers were kind and patient, and Sarah quickly began catching up academically. Her new teacher, Mrs. Peterson, was amazed at how quickly Sarah absorbed new information. "She's remarkably bright," Mrs. Peterson told David and Maria during their first parent-teacher conference. "With some extra support, I think she could easily get back to grade level by the end of the year." David, drawing on his experience as a middle school teacher, worked with Sarah every evening on her homework. He was patient and encouraging, never making her feel stupid when she struggled with concepts she had missed during her time at Riverside. "Learning is like building a house," he would tell her. "Sometimes we have to go back and strengthen the foundation before we can build the walls higher." But adjusting to life as part of a family wasn't always easy. Sarah had spent so long protecting herself from disappointment that it was hard to fully trust that this new life was permanent. She would sometimes test David and Maria's patience, subconsciously waiting for them to decide she was too much trouble and send her back. One evening, Sarah accidentally broke one of Maria's favorite coffee mugs while helping with dishes. At Riverside, such an accident would have resulted in punishment and harsh words. Sarah immediately burst into tears, apologizing over and over, certain that this mistake would be the end of her new life. I'm sorry," she cried. "Please don't send me back. I'll be more careful, I promise." Maria immediately knelt down and pulled Sarah into her arms. "Sweet girl, it's just a mug. Accidents happen. No one is sending you anywhere. You're our daughter now, and this is your home forever. But I broke your favorite one," Sarah sobbed. "And we can get another mug," David said gently, "but we can never get another you. You're much more important than any coffee cup could ever be." It took several more incidents like this before Sarah began to truly believe that her parents' love was unconditional. Each time she made a mistake or had a bad day, David and Maria responded with patience and understanding, slowly helping her heal from the wounds left by years of instability and loss. The changes in Sarah were gradual but remarkable. Her nightmares became less frequent. She began to laugh more easily and smile without forcing it. Her grades improved steadily as she felt secure enough to focus on learning instead of just surviving. Max, the golden retriever, became Sarah's constant companion. She would tell him all her secrets and worries, and he would listen with patient brown eyes and a wagging tail. When she had trouble sleeping, Max would curl up beside her bed until she felt safe enough to drift off. Sarah's favorite place in her new home was the tire swing in the backyard. She would spend hours swinging back and forth, sometimes reading a book, sometimes just thinking about how different her life had become. The swing represented freedom to her, the freedom to play, to dream, to just be a kid. As Christmas approached, Sarah experienced something she hadn't felt since her grandmother's: death. Excitement about the holidays. Maria involved her in every aspect of their preparations, from decorating the tree to making traditional Mexican cookies called polvorones. "In our family, everyone gets to hang one special ornament on the tree each year," Maria explained as they unpacked boxes of decorations. "This one was my grandmother's," she said, holding up a delicate glass angel. "And this one David made in 3rd grade," she laughed, showing Sarah a lopsided star made of painted popsicle sticks. Sarah looked at the beautiful ornaments, feeling sad that she didn't have one to contribute. "I don't have a special ornament," she said quietly. "Well then, we'll have to make one," David said. "Every Rodriguez family member needs a Christmas ornament." They spent an evening creating Sarah's first family ornament, a small wooden star that they painted together and decorated with glitter. In the center, they wrote, "Sarah's first Christmas as a Rodriguez, 2023. When Christmas morning arrived, Sarah woke up to find presents under the tree with her name on them. Real presents wrapped in beautiful paper with bows and ribbons. She had received a few token gifts at Riverside during holidays, usually donated items that were practical rather than fun. But these presents were chosen specifically for her. There were art supplies, because Maria had noticed how much Sarah enjoyed drawing. There were books, because David had seen her love of reading. There was a beautiful new dress in her favorite color, purple. But the gift that made her cry happy tears was a small wooden jewelry box that played music when opened. Inside was a locket with pictures of David and Maria. "So you can carry us with you wherever you go," Maria explained as she helped Sarah put on the necklace. Sarah had made presents for her new parents too, with help from her art teacher at school. For David, she had written a short story about a teacher who saved a lost child. For Maria, she had painted a picture of their family, including Max standing in front of their house. That Christmas was the happiest day Sarah could remember since her grandmother's death. As they sat around the tree after breakfast, still in their pajamas, Sarah felt something she had almost forgotten existed, the warm, safe feeling of belonging to a family. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Maria brought out a special gift she had been saving. It was a small wooden recipe box, painted the same lavender color as Sarah's bedroom. "I thought you might like to start collecting family recipes," Maria said. "We can write down your grandmother's tamale recipe and all the dishes we learned to cook together." Sarah opened the box to find that Maria had already written out several recipe cards, including one that read, "Abuela's tamales," Sarah's recipe at the top. "You remembered," Sarah whispered, thinking of the conversation they had had months ago about cooking with her grandmother. "Of course I remembered," Maria said. "That's what families do. They remember the things that matter to each other." As Sarah held the recipe box, she realized that she was no longer just surviving each day. She was building a new life, creating new memories, and becoming part of a family story that would continue for years to come. The scared, hopeless little girl who had arrived at Riverside 13 months earlier was slowly disappearing, replaced by a confident, loved child who was beginning to believe in her own worth and potential. Spring brought new adventures and milestones. Sarah joined the school choir, discovered she had a beautiful singing voice, and made her first real friends. She invited her friend Emma over for dinner one evening, proudly introducing her to "my mom and dad," with a confidence that made David and Maria's hearts soar. Each day brought small victories and healing moments. Sarah learned to ask for help when she needed it, to express her feelings instead of hiding them, and to trust that her parents would always be there for her. The transformation was so complete that when Ms. Thompson, the social worker, came for her required 6-month follow-up visit, she barely recognized the thriving child who greeted her at the door. As Sarah's second year with the Rodriguez family began, she had grown into a confident, happy 11-year-old who bore little resemblance to the frightened child who had once lived at Riverside. Her grades were excellent, she had a close circle of friends, and she was actively involved in school activities. But most importantly, she had developed an unshakable belief in herself and her future. One day, while cleaning out old boxes in the garage, Sarah found a journal that David had given her when she first moved in. She had been too scared to write in it then, afraid that putting her hopes and dreams on paper might somehow jinx her new life. Now, as she flipped through the blank pages, she decided it was time to start writing her story. "Dear Journal," she began, "my name is Sarah Rodriguez and I have the best family in the world. I know that might sound silly, but it's true. I used to think that bad things happened to me because I wasn't good enough or lovable enough. Now I know that sometimes bad things just happen, but good things can happen too. And you have to be ready to recognize them when they do." Writing in the journal became a daily habit for Sarah. She wrote about her school achievements, her friendships, her dreams for the future, and her gratitude for her family. But she also wrote about her past, processing the trauma and loss she had experienced in a healthy way. David and Maria noticed that their daughter seemed to be working through something important, and they gave her the space to do so while making. Sure, she knew they were always available if she needed support. One evening at dinner, Sarah surprised them with an announcement. "I've been thinking about something," she said, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "I want to do something to help other kids who are still in places like Riverside." Maria and David exchanged glances, proud of their daughter's compassionate heart, but wanting to make sure she was ready for such an emotional undertaking. "What did you have in mind, mija?" Maria asked gently. "Well, I remember how lonely and scared I felt there, especially during holidays. I thought maybe we could organize some kind of event or donation drive to bring some joy to the kids who are still there." David smiled. "That's a wonderful idea, Sarah. What kind of event were you thinking about?" Sarah's eyes lit up with excitement. "Maybe a holiday party? With games and good food and presents? And maybe some of the kids could come visit our house and see what a real family home looks like?" The more Sarah talked about her idea, the more animated she became. She had clearly been thinking about this for a long time, planning every detail in her mind. "I want them to know that there's hope," she explained. "That families like you really exist, and that being adopted can be wonderful. I want them to see that their stories don't have to end at Riverside." David and Maria were deeply moved by their daughter's desire to help others, but they also wanted to make sure she was emotionally prepared for returning to the place that had caused her so much pain. "Are you sure you're ready to go back there?" Maria asked gently. "It might bring up some difficult memories." Sarah considered this seriously. "I think I need to go back," she said. "Not as the scared little girl I used to be, but as who I am now. I want Mrs. Blackwood and all the staff to see that I made it, that I found a family who loves me, and that I'm happy and successful." Over the next few weeks, Sarah threw herself into planning what she called Hope Day at Riverside Children's Home. She contacted her school to organize a toy drive, asked local businesses to donate food and supplies, and even convinced the church choir that Maria attended to come perform for the children. Ms. Thompson, Sarah's former social worker, was thrilled to help coordinate the event. "This is exactly the kind of thing those children need to see," she said. "A success story from someone who was once in their exact situation." As the day of the event approached, Sarah experienced a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She hadn't seen Riverside or any of the children there for over a year, and she wasn't sure how it would feel to return. The night before Hope Day, Sarah couldn't sleep. She found herself in the backyard on her tire swing, looking up at the stars and thinking about all the children who would be lying in their narrow beds at Riverside, maybe wondering if they would ever find families of their own. David found her there and sat down on the grass beside the swing. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "What if I see kids I used to know and they're still there? What if Mrs. Blackwood is mean to me in front of everyone? What if the children think I'm showing off?" "Those are all valid concerns," David said thoughtfully. "But I think you're doing something really brave and important. You're showing those kids that there's hope for their futures. And that's a gift that only someone who has walked in their shoes can give." Sarah looked down at her dad, this man who had chosen to love her and call her his daughter. "What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm just lucky?" "Then you tell them the truth," David said. "That it wasn't just luck, that you never gave up hope, even when things seemed impossible. That you remained kind and open to love even when the world felt cruel. That takes real strength, Sarah, and these kids need to see that strength is possible." The morning of Hope Day arrived bright and sunny. Sarah chose her outfit carefully, nice enough to show that she was thriving, but not so fancy that it would make the children feel bad about their own worn clothes. She wore the locket Maria had given her for Christmas and carried a small bag, filled with handwritten notes of encouragement. As their car pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Children's Home, Sarah's heart began to race. The building looked exactly the same, gray, imposing, and cold. But this time, she wasn't arriving as a scared, abandoned child. She was coming back as someone's beloved daughter, surrounded by people who cared about her. The transformation in the common room was amazing. Volunteers had decorated with colorful balloons and streamers, tables were loaded with delicious food, and there were games and activities set up everywhere. The children's faces showed a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Nothing like this had ever happened at Riverside before. Sarah spotted several children she remembered from her time there, including Jenny, the girl who had tried to protect her from disappointment. Jenny was now 13 and would be aging out of the system in a few years. When she saw Sarah, her eyes widened in surprise. "Sarah? Is that really you?" Jenny asked, hardly believing the confident, well-dressed girl standing before her. "It's me," Sarah said with a warm smile. "But it's Sarah Rodriguez now," she introduced Jenny to David and Maria, who welcomed the teenager with genuine warmth. Jenny looked back and forth between Sarah and her parents, studying their interactions carefully. "They really adopted you?" Jenny asked quietly. "And they're nice to you?" "They're wonderful," Sarah said honestly. "They love me exactly as I am, and they've helped me become the person I was meant to be." Throughout the day, Sarah moved among the children, playing games, helping serve food, and most importantly, listening to their stories and fears. She met 5-year-old Tommy, who reminded her of herself when she first arrived, clutching a stuffed animal and jumping at every loud noise. "Are you really someone's daughter now?" Tommy asked in wonder. "I really am," Sarah said, kneeling down to his level. "And do you know what that means?" Tommy shook his head. "It means that if it can happen for me, it can happen for you too." "There, are families out there looking for children just like you?" Mrs. Blackwood watched the festivities from the sidelines, her expression unreadable. Sarah had been dreading this encounter, but when she finally approached her former tormentor, she felt surprisingly calm. "Hello, Mrs. Blackwood," Sarah said, politely. The older woman looked her up and down, taking in Sarah's obvious happiness and health. "Sarah Martinez," she said stiffly. "Actually, it's Sarah Rodriguez now," Sarah corrected gently. "I wanted to thank you." Mrs. Blackwood looked surprised. "Thank me?" "Yes. Living here taught me to be strong and resilient. It taught me to appreciate kindness when I found it, and to never take love for granted. Those are valuable lessons." For perhaps the first time in her career, Mrs. Blackwood seemed at a loss for words. As the day continued, Sarah shared her story with groups of children, being honest about the challenges of adjustment, but emphasizing the joy and security she had found with her family. She handed out her encouraging notes and promised to stay in touch with several of the older children. The highlight of the event came when Maria taught a group of children how to make simple Mexican cookies, sharing stories about her own childhood as they worked. David organized games in the courtyard, his teacher's instincts helping him connect with children of all ages. As the day wound down, Ms. Thompson pulled Sarah aside. "You've done something incredible here today," she said with tears in her eyes. "I've never seen these children so hopeful and engaged. You've given them something precious, the belief that their lives can change." On the drive home, Sarah felt emotionally drained but deeply satisfied. She had faced her past and transformed it into something positive. She had given hope to children who desperately needed it, and she had shown herself just how far she had come. "I'm proud of you, Mija," Maria said from the front seat. "What you did today took real courage." "I want to do it again," Sarah said. "Maybe not just at Riverside, but at other children's homes too. I want to start a program where adopted kids share their stories with kids who are still waiting." David smiled at his daughter in the rearview mirror. "I think that's a fantastic idea. We can help you research how to get something like that started." That night, Sarah wrote in her journal about the day's events. "I used to think my story was about being unwanted and abandoned," she wrote. "But today, I realize that my real story is about finding my way home. And now I want to help other kids find their way home too." As she closed the journal and prepared for bed, Sarah realized that her painful past had become her greatest strength. The little girl who had once felt broken and worthless had grown into someone who could inspire hope in others. Her journey from despair to joy was complete, but her mission to help other children was just beginning. 5 years had passed since Hope Day at Riverside, and Sarah Rodriguez had become a force of positive change in her community. Now 16 years old, she was an honor student, captain of her school's debate team, and the founder of a nonprofit organization called Stories of Hope that connected adopted children with kids in foster care and group homes. What had started as a single event at Riverside had grown into a movement. Sarah had organized Hope Days at 12 different children's facilities across 3 counties. She had trained over 50 adopted teens and adults to share their stories, and she had personally mentored dozens of children who were waiting for their forever families. The program had caught the attention of local media, and Sarah had been featured in newspaper articles and television interviews. But the recognition that meant the most to her came in the form of letters from children whose lives had been touched by her work. Dear Sarah, one letter read, "My name is Marcus, and I'm 9 years old. You came to my group home last year and told us about your family. I didn't believe you at first because I thought nobody would want a kid like me, but yesterday my social worker told me that a family wants to meet me. I remembered what you said about being brave and believing in myself. Thank you for giving me hope." These letters filled a special box in Sarah's room, and she read them whenever she needed motivation to continue her work. Each success story reinforced her belief that every child deserved to know they were worthy of love and belonging. Sarah's relationship with David and Maria had only grown stronger over the years. They had navigated the typical challenges of adolescence. Together, from friend drama to academic pressure to questions about dating, but their foundation of trust and open communication had carried them through everything. "I can't imagine our lives without you," Maria often told Sarah. "You didn't just become our daughter, you made us better people." It was true. David had become more patient and empathetic in his teaching, often going the extra mile for students who seemed to be struggling with more than just academics. Maria had started volunteering at a clinic that provided free health care to children in foster care, using her nursing skills to help kids who reminded her of Sarah. As Sarah's junior year of high school progressed, college applications and future plans became frequent topics of conversation. Sarah had always known she wanted to work with children and families, but now she was exploring specific career paths that would allow her to make the biggest impact. "I've been thinking about studying social work," she told her parents one evening over dinner. "I want to become a social worker like Miss Thompson, but maybe work on the policy side too. I think there are ways to improve the system that could help more kids find families faster." David nodded thoughtfully. "You'd be amazing at that. You understand the system from the inside, and you have the heart to want to make it better. Plus," Maria added with a smile, "you've already proven you can inspire people to action. Look at what you've built with Stories of Hope." Sarah had been accepted to several excellent universities, including some with full scholarships based on her academic achievements and community service. The idea of leaving home for college was both exciting and terrifying. She had never been away from David and Maria for more than a few days since her adoption. "Are you worried about me going away to college?" Sarah asked Maria one afternoon as they worked together in the garden. Maria paused in her weeding and looked at her daughter thoughtfully. "A little," she admitted, "but not because I don't think you're ready. You're one of the strongest, most capable people I know. I just love having you here with us." "I love being here too," Sarah said, "but I feel like I need to learn more so I can help more kids, and I promise I'll come home for holidays and summers." "Mija, you don't have to promise us anything except that you'll follow your dreams," Maria said, pulling Sarah into a hug. "We're so proud of who you've become, and we know you're going to do incredible things." That spring, Sarah received an unexpected phone call that would change her perspective on her work in a profound way. It was Jenny, the girl from Riverside who had tried to protect Sarah from disappointment all those years ago. "Sarah, I hope you remember me," Jenny's voice said nervously over the phone. "This is Jenny from Riverside. I know it's been a long time." "Jenny? Of course I remember you," Sarah exclaimed. "How are you? Where are you?" Well, that's actually why I'm calling, Jenny said, her voice breaking slightly. I aged out of the system when I turned 18, just like we always knew I would. It's been really hard, Sarah. I've been bouncing between different apartments, working minimum wage, jobs, trying to figure out how to be an adult when nobody ever taught me how. Sarah's heart ached for her friend. She knew that many kids who aged out of foster care struggled with homelessness, unemployment, and mental health issues because they had no family support system to help them transition to adulthood. But something amazing happened last week, Jenny continued, her voice growing stronger. I was working at a coffee shop, and this woman came in and we started talking. She was there with her teenage daughter, and when she heard my story, she told me about this program at the community college that helps former foster kids get job training and education. She even offered to help me apply. Jenny paused, and Sarah could hear her taking a deep breath. Sarah, I kept thinking about what you said at that Hope Day event years ago, about how our stories don't have to end at Riverside, and how we can write new chapters for ourselves. I realized I was still letting fear control my story. Jenny, that's incredible, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. I'm so proud of you for not giving up. There's more, Jenny said. The woman who helped me? Her name is Patricia, and she and her husband have been fostering teenagers for 10 years. They asked if I wanted to move in with them while I go to school. Not as a foster kid, I'm too old for that, but as part of their family. They said they've helped a dozen young adults transition to independence over the years. Sarah was speechless. After all these years, Jenny had found her own version of a forever family. I wanted to call you because I realized something, Jenny continued. If you hadn't come back to Riverside that day and shown us that happy endings were possible, I might never have believed I deserved better than just surviving. You planted a seed of hope in me that took years to grow, but it finally did. After the call ended, Sarah sat in her room thinking about the ripple effects of hope and kindness. She thought about all the children who had heard her story over the years and wondered how many more were carrying seeds of hope that would bloom in their own time. That evening, she shared Jenny's story with David and Maria, and they all cried happy tears together. You know what this means, don't you? David said. Your work isn't just helping kids find families. It's helping them believe in their own worth and potential, no matter what their circumstances are. As graduation approached, Sarah reflected on her journey from that scared 8-year-old who had entered Riverside to the confident young woman she had become. She thought about her grandmother, who had loved her first and taught her that she was worthy of love. She thought about David and Maria, who had chosen her and shown her what unconditional love looked like. And she thought about all the children whose lives she had touched through stories of hope. At her high school graduation, Sarah was chosen as the valedictorian. As she stood at the podium looking out at the crowd, she saw David and Maria in the front row, beaming with pride. Ms. Thompson was there too, along with several families who had adopted children after meeting Sarah at various events. 5 years ago, I thought my story was about loss and abandonment. Sarah began her speech. I thought I was damaged goods, unwanted and unworthy of love. But I learned something important. We are not defined by the chapters of our lives that we didn't choose to write. We are defined by how we choose to write the chapters that come next. She spoke about resilience, hope, and the power of human connection. She thanked David and Maria for showing her what family meant, and she challenged her classmates to look for ways to make a difference in the lives of others. Every person in this room has the power to change someone's story, she concluded. Sometimes it's as simple as choosing kindness over indifference or hope over despair. Sometimes it's as profound as opening your heart and your home to a child who needs a family. But always, always, it starts with believing that every person, no matter their past, no matter their circumstances, has infinite worth and limitless potential. As Sarah walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she knew that her real education was just beginning. She had learned the most important lessons of her life not in a classroom, but in the halls of Riverside, in the loving home David and Maria had provided, and in the faces of the children she had inspired to keep hoping. The scared little girl who had been locked away for 7 years had become a young woman determined to unlock hope in the hearts of others. Her story had come full circle, but her mission to change the world one child at a time was just beginning. That night, as Sarah packed for college, she carefully placed the box of letters from the children she had helped in her suitcase. These letters would remind her why her work mattered, and they would inspire her to keep fighting for every child who was still waiting for their own happy ending. Sarah Rodriguez was no longer defined by what had been done to her, but by what she chose to do for others, and that, she knew, was the most powerful transformation of all.